at the time when this was happening, or when the big thrust, I guess, was happening with anti-apartheid move efforts, were you personally involved in any way, or was your church involved in any way?
Thank you. Yeah. As you were saying right at the beginning, I'm part of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, an ordained minister in that particular tribe, as it were. And the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, just to give you a sense of it, is very representative of the population percentage-wise. In 1981, it was at the height of the struggle against apartheid. 800 Methodist people came together, representing the different racial groupings in the country, in a gathering. It was an 8-day gathering called Obedience 81. And we came together to ask the question, what does obedience look like within the context of this highly, highly polarized and oppressive context that we were all living in? At the end of the conference, 800 people unanimously, it was quite a moving moment, 800 people unanimously accepted what we came to call the Obedience Charter of 81. And one of the very significant lines in that charter is that we pledged ourselves as the Methodist Church to be one and undivided, and we pledged ourselves to the struggle for a just and for a free South Africa. Since then, we've had moments of wonderful faithfulness and also moments of tragic failure as a church, seeking to be faithful to those very, very high ideals. So that's the wider context of the Methodist Church of Southern Africa. During the 80s, I was the pastor of a predominantly white community. You know, we were highly segregated, so that was obvious. So one of the real challenges for me as a Methodist pastor was to almost, make that big vision real at a local level, if that makes some sense. And, I didn't want to, I didn't want to kind of knock people on the head all the time about this. I really felt I needed to find, as a local pastor, another way in which I could faithfully represent our ideals for a one and undivided church and the struggle for a free and a just South Africa. And I think I also need to say that in many ways, I myself was on a journey. And it's important for me to say that. I didn't have everything together. Clearly, I was born 3 years after we adopted the policy of apartheid. I was born in 1951. So I grew up in a highly segregated world in South Africa. But I was hugely fortunate in that after my conversion, I became part of the Methodist Church. And when I was 21 years of age, I was part of a 3-month residential training program in leadership within the Methodist community. And for the very first time, I met Black people, Black Methodists, on an equal footing. For the very first time, I was taught by Black teachers. For the very, very first time, I was exposed to what this policy was doing to fellow human beings in South Africa. For the very first time, I studied the Bible with Black people, and it had a huge effect on me. But in spite of that effect, while I was ministering, I still was working out how to be faithful myself. So there wasn't a sense in which I had it all together and I needed to sort out the congregation. I needed with them to learn what it meant to be faithful. And one of the models that I was drawn to very deeply, and we kind of created it within the congregation, was the concept of a pilgrimage of pain and hope, where on a regular basis, I would go away with 12, 14 people for 8 days, so it was significant, and we would share life with Black Methodists. And we would go as pilgrims. We wouldn't go as tourists or as evangelists. We literally went as pilgrims. That was our posture. We wanted to learn what it meant to be Black within South Africa. And these experiences were hugely transformative and very painful as well for all of us as we went on these pilgrimages year after year. And it affected, I think, people very deeply in terms of the way they perceived their own discipleship to Jesus Christ. So that became one of the most, how do I put it, one of the most significant ways in which we did spiritual formation within that context. And I've written about that, as I said to you earlier. I wrote about that experience in A Mile in My Shoes. That's my plug for the conversation.